Why will failure make you the best at your job? Stay tuned to find out. Hey, I'm Sam with Systems of Impact, your place for growth-minded millennials looking to find their six-figure careers. So how is failure generally seen? If we look at the definition, failure just means a lack of success. However, that's not typically how it feels. When we were growing up and we were going to school, typically failure just meant that we just didn't succeed, but we were also usually punished for those mistakes. So for example, if you didn't get a good grade on a test, there was usually repercussions to that, whether you didn't pass the course or the class, or you ended up having to retake the test because you just didn't understand the content. Either way, when it came from an academic background, you're looking at failure typically just meant that there was a mistake that happened, and then psychologically, we usually think of that as being a punishment. However, as we start to get older, the failure ends up being more of a fear. We fear failure. We're looking at it from a terms of almost like it's a mortality event, when in reality, we just didn't succeed at something. We weren't good enough yet. But because of that fear of failure, we a lot of the times either don't try or we don't put as much behind it because we think we may not succeed. So that brings me to, what is failure really? When we really look at failure, it's really just a learning opportunity. It just means that you're not good enough yet. And that's really important, because when it comes from a perspective of you didn't succeed at something, especially when you're first trying something out you're just getting started at it, usually we suck at what we start at first. It's very rare that we're just naturally talented at something. And so when we're first getting started, we suck. As kids, when we're first learning to walk, we're stumbling all over the place. When we try to skateboard, for example, we're falling down and, spraining ankles left and right. We're just not usually good. So if failure really is just a learning opportunity, this means that we have to, from an identity perspective, start to look at failure as a learning opportunity, which means that we need to start looking at it from a perspective of a learner. If you're familiar with any of Tom Bilyeu's stuff and impact theory, he gets very deep into this. But just a super high level quick Cliff Notes version, essentially when you're looking at it from an identity perspective, you want to be anti-fragile. So meaning the more something is attacked, the stronger it gets. And from a learning perspective, the more you're learning, the better you're becoming. And so if you're first starting out as something new and then you're starting to get better, it's that same mentality. You're learning something, you're getting better at it, and you start to compound those measurements. But from a failure perspective, you're constantly failing across that path. Now, because failure does end up being a learning opportunity, that's not to say success isn't a learning opportunity. The challenge with success is we very rarely go back retroactively and look at success and say, why was I successful in this area? How can I do better? Usually, and I'm not saying all the time, but usually when we have a success, we don't go back and analyze it. We just keep going. And so as a result, we actually learn less from our successes than our failures. So because of that, if we're looking at it in terms of a failure is a learning opportunity, that means that some of our biggest growth opportunities are because we didn't succeed. We failed at that thing. We made a mistake and then we learned from it. And so from my own perspective, some of my biggest learnings in life have come from the darkest of times. So when I was going through some of the hardest areas of my life, I was going through and getting a separation and then a divorce, and then I was getting fired from my job, and then I was living on unemployment, had to move back in with my parents, and I'm going through this process, and because I stumbled so hard, a lot of the learnings that I ended up gathering as a result propelled me way further than if I was going from a success perspective and trying to achieve the exact same things. And that's why when you get into, and I'll say another name here, Ray Dalio, if you look at his book Principles, it's one of those areas where when you look at growth, it's essentially where you're looking at failure plus pain plus reflection equals growth. And that's not to say that there isn't potential pain and success, but what it does say is that trifecta is ultimately going to help propel you further And you're going to get better learnings out of it as a result because you won't make those same mistakes twice. And that is the key. So if we're looking at a company culture that is taking this into account, one of the core areas that I look for when I'm looking at a company is the overall culture. Do they encourage any kind of mistakes, or do they applaud, failures? Do they help you learn from them? Are they constantly helping you grow? It's that kind of culture that is ultimately going to help propel you forward and help you not just grow in your career, but as a person. But whereas if you're in a culture that punishes mistakes happening, then it's going to be much more difficult, and a lot of your career advancement is going to end up having to take place outside of your normal 9 to 5. So keep that in mind when it comes to whatever company culture that you're residing in, whether it is going to foster growth or it potentially will hamper growth, and how you're going to approach that. So the key piece here, if you take nothing else away from this video, is that failure is a superpower, and it really will help you propel you forward. The key here is not making the same mistakes twice. Learning from those mistakes and actually implementing those learnings, and then going forward and then making another mistake and then another mistake, but never making the same mistake twice. This is one of those things to where if you harness a superpower, it will help you overall in your career go much further, and leveraging something that is historically seen as something extremely negative, when in fact it's really not. It's there to help you learn. It's there to help you get better. And without it, we wouldn't necessarily be able to adapt to our situations and our surroundings as well as that we potentially could. Reframe failure. See it as a learning opportunity. Jump into the particular areas. See if it's something that you can harness as a superpower. And I guarantee you, if you're in the right environment, failure is going to help you grow more than you probably ever anticipated, and just the overall abundance that is going to bring you is going to be mind-blowing. Now, if you're finding value in today's video, make sure to hit that like button, and I want you to put it in the comments of what have been some of your biggest mistakes in your career, and what did you actually learn from it? How did it benefit you in some way to provide some kind of learning that you potentially wouldn't have had otherwise? Make sure to put those in the comments. I appreciate you taking some time to watch this video, and if you do have any questions, put those in the comments below as well, and I'll see you in the next video.